Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for WLBT Plus. My name is Cara Shirley, and I'm your digital news desk host. And I am joined by our lead investigator, CJ LeMaster. He is the investigator extraordinaire. Thanks.
Let's dial it down a little bit.
Just a little. Okay. All right.
I get by.
You get by. You get by. Well, let's first I want to thank you guys for tuning in. If you're watching on our website, on our news app, you're certainly more than welcome to do that. But if you join us on, say, our YouTube page or even our Facebook page, you will be able to ask questions, leave comments, anything like that in the comments section there. We love doing this stuff like this, especially the behind the investigations, because it gives you guys an opportunity to talk to us and ask questions about the stories that we've been working on.
And see a little bit of the process, too. I think people sometimes wonder if, and I'm going to pop this out for just a second. Yeah. Those of you who may not know, we sometimes wear earpieces to be able to hear various things and clips that we're going to play during this behind the investigation thing. But it also plays what we're saying at a delay, and it kind of throws you off. If you can imagine, everything you're saying is you're hearing it in your ear a second after you've said it. It can get a little crazy.
It can.
But that's another example of behind the scenes. It's really cool for people to get the chance to actually see how we do what we do,
right?
The things that we look at, because I think more than ever, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, being able to show our process to you and show how we get information in, what we're sharing with you, to show more than anything else that we're not sitting here trying to actively hide things from people.
Exactly.
We're not trying to just force a narrative on someone. We're showing you that, there may be times that I start investigating something and I think something's going to happen, or I think maybe from previous investigating or documents we've uncovered that, okay, this is the situation. And then over the course of looking into it, I realized that what I originally thought wasn't actually true. And so you can't go into something thinking that, oh, well, this person is bad news and this person is this and this person's responsible for this, because you may not have all sides of the story. You may not know everything that there is to know. And there may be very good reasons why someone may or may not have done something that is either illegal or unethical. So it's always good to make sure from our end that we don't pass judgment. We're not passing judgment. We're not trying to convict somebody before they're even charged. We try to get as much of a comprehensive view of something, a sort of a 1,000-yard view, if you will, or 1,000-foot view of everything, and make sure that what we're showing you is in depth and represents a lot of research and nothing hastily thrown together, because anybody can do that. And if you look at Facebook posts every day, you see plenty of people doing that.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. That's one thing I tell our viewers a lot when they ask questions. They say, we saw this on Facebook, or what about this? We're like, well, we have to verify it before. We can't just take Facebook's word for it. We have to speak with officials and people behind the scenes that know the things before we can just put something out there. But Facebook can also be a really good place to get information on stuff. It gives you breadcrumbs of lines of investigation to follow.
That's right. I mean, we get tips all the time. A lot of our investigations come from tips that we've gotten from people. But we don't just take that tip and just run with it on television. And when somebody gives us something, and we may have heard the terminology, sometimes somebody says something is off the record. Well, that means that the information they've given us, we can't say that person gave it to us.
Right.
And we have to figure out a way to confirm that information ourselves. On social media, you might see other folks who may or may not work in various facets of media that will say, well, I'm hearing from a source that this is happening. There's been a lot of criticism on national news outlets like the New York Times and Washington Post, for using a lot of unnamed sources and not naming who those people are. So when you do that, unless you're very sure of that source's credibility,
Right.
then you're really running the risk of putting something out there that you might have to come back later and say, we got to issue a correction. That person told us that, but it's not actually true. And we had to go back. So what we try to do is make sure that we vet this stuff before it gets to that point. So we're not having to sit there and tell you later, hey, we jumped the gun. Here's what actually happened. We try to make sure that we fact check this stuff before it goes on air. We make every effort to do that so that we know that what we're putting out there, whether it's on WLBT Plus, on our broadcast platforms, online, is the most accurate information available. Because the absolute worst thing that anybody would hate to have to do is to come back and say, hey, we got this wrong. It's actually this, or there's that. And we clarify. And, there have been times that I get a misspelling wrong or something like that. I mean, we're human. Things like that happen. But we are very intentional about making sure that we're as accurate as possible. And I think that's very important to let people know about, especially today.
Yes, especially today, because there are so many people out there that are can be rather pushing information out as the truth, as having all of the evidence for that to be the truth, and it's not the case. So we just want to make sure that people know, hey, we're looking to get the facts on everything, on both sides of the spectrum here, I guess. And what we're talking about today is a story, an investigation that CJ, whatever your name is.
I've been called worse.
That CJ, which, by the way, I'm horrible with pronouncing names. I do that all the time. Anybody that has watched me for a period of time knows that at least once a show I go, I'm probably mispronouncing that. I apologize. But CJ did an investigation on Smith Wills Stadium here in Jackson. We've got a lot of people tuning in. Let me say hello to them real quick. We got Sandra Cagle, who is tuning in from Clinton. Hello, Sandra.
Hey, Sandra.
And Miss Shirley Thomas. I really like the name Shirley.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because my last name, I don't know. I'm a little partial, but Shirley is watching from Port Gibson, Mississippi.
A little funny, quick tidbit about Port Gibson. So years ago, there was a sheriff there. He's no longer the sheriff of Claiborne County, which is Port Gibson, of course, the county seat. And Port Gibson's a small town, a small city. And it's so funny. The sheriff at the time, Marvin Lucas, every time he would ask me to come out there and visit him, he'd always say, I'm going to take you out to eat. And I'm like, well, Sheriff, you don't do that. And you know where he would always want to meet me? And this is not an endorsement, by the way. He would say, well, I'm going to take you up there to the McDonald's. I'm going to buy you something. and he was just the nicest guy. I thought the world of him. I don't know if he decided to run and then ended up losing, or if he just, decided not to run again. But he was very proud. And I'm going to tell you, people who, and as coming from a small town, being from Boonville, which is way up in North Mississippi, you are grateful for every single place you have. You're grateful for every stop sign you have in those small towns. And so this is certainly not an endorsement for any particular fast food location, but I will just tell you, he was just proud to have a little place that he could take somebody to get a little something to eat.
They got good nuggets.
Yeah. I mean, and listen, and Port Gibson's it's a great place. There's a lot of history there. It's unfortunate that the couple of times that we've been out there to do stories have been stories that were unfortunately negative in terms of things happening, like unexplained deaths, things of that nature. And so you hate that. But got a lot of people who watch us out in Port Gibson. I'm sure Shirley watches us to some degree. And so Shirley, we appreciate you joining us today.
Yes.
To talk about this very important story, which again is Jackson centric, but it also kind of represents some other things. We've talked about this kind of thing before. We've talked about back in May, and this is sort of the genesis of what led us here, but that there was a bill, I believe was introduced by State Representative Trey Lamar, or he was one of the authors of the bill, or as a bond, I think it was a bond bill. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it listed the state basically taking back ownership or taking a lease back that they had with the city of Jackson over a particular part of property. It did not mention Smith Wills Stadium by name. In all fairness, these bills, when they discuss land in another area, they usually list a lot description. They don't usually list even sometimes that it's in Jackson or that they may do that, but they won't necessarily list, for example, proper names and things like
Right.
that. And so it looked very unusual, just because when that bill came out, some lawmakers were completely caught off guard. They didn't know about it. The city of Jackson has a lease with the state of Mississippi to use that property, which includes Smith Wills Stadium. It's supposed to be used for park purposes. And there had been some speculation that from this lawmaker in particular, that because there was an operation there with the stadium, Churchill Smoke Shop, which I think they also, I don't know if they serve food there or what have you, but that did not meet the definition of a park purpose. And so the city may have violated its lease. And so now the state was wanting to take that property back.
Mm-hmm.
The city says that's not the case, and this will probably end up going to court. What we believe is happening now is that the AG's office is looking into whether or not that the city violated the lease there.
Let me show you guys real quick before we go any deeper where Smith Wills is.
Sure, yeah, that's good.
I knew of this place, but I didn't know that this was Smith Wills. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull it up on the map for you guys, so you can see it right here. So if you see let me move it to the middle. In the middle of your screen here, this is downtown Jackson area. Well, Smith Wills is right here on Lakeland Drive. Let me zoom in for you. It's right by the Agriculture Museum, Mississippi Agriculture Museum, which is right there on your screen. And then Smith Wills is circled with this little yellow, very poorly drawn circle there, actually.
That's okay. No, it's fine.
It's the best I could do with the mouse. But this is where Smith Wills is, right there on Lakeland Drive, if you were unfamiliar with it.
And, and the whole property there, I'm not sure of the acreage. I'm not going to get into that necessarily, but suffice it to say the property that encompasses the stadium, which is several acres, is an area that various management groups have utilized over time. The facility, I think, is 50 plus years old. The facility is something that has a great deal of history behind it. And, when the city, we're kind of leading into what the story is about here. The city entered into a management contract, management agreement with a guy named Tim Bennett. Tim Bennett, who owns, I believe it's Cush Sports. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. But anyway, this contract was for 10, 20 years. And originally, the city entered into this back in September, I believe, of 2019. And so we only knew about and talked to him originally when this news came that the state was trying to take this property back because they claimed the city violated its lease. And because Tim operates the property there, Tim was operating it and probably had some sort of management authority with the smoke shop being there. We felt like talking to him was appropriate. And so he addressed some of the concerns about a possible state takeover of that property. Then we start hearing about, and this stuff first kind of comes to light from Jackson Jambalaya. And he had posted some things about rent payments that weren't made. In fact, no rent payments had been made to Smith Wills Stadium until this month for the duration of that contract, which was over 4 years at this point. We're more than 4 years into the contract. And so we started looking at that and wondering kind of, okay, well, we have the documents that show that we got independently, that show that there was no rent payment. We know that there is a contract that Mr. Bennett has with the VA. It's a U.S. government contract to be able to get money in for providing parking and then shuttle services to take people from that parking lot. You saw over the map there, you can see, pull it up again real quick, Karen, I'll show you. So this area, so the VA contract involved this parking lot here. And so you'd park there, they'd take a shuttle and take you to work, and it would be something where there was limited parking for VA employees, and so this would help them. Well, he was getting $360,000 a year from that contract, and he was having to pay $125,000 a year to the city, but he wasn't paying that. And so on its face, it looks a little weird, looks a little unusual. It looks like, what's going on if you're getting all this money and you're not? And so we wanted to go right to the source. We wanted to go and talk to Tim Bennett And he had never talked to anybody about this particular thing, about the rent payments and about the VA contract, until he sat down with us. And I'm really glad he did. We talked to him for 90 minutes. So, you watch the story and you see, I think the story was 6 minutes long that
About
aired
6
last
minutes,
night.
yeah.
And but his interview was much longer than that. We talked to him 2 different times. And what we tried to do is just make sure that as we tell this story, that we also, you want to, I say you go to get both sides, but you want to get all sides that you can to a story. You want to make sure, certainly if somebody is implicated here,
Right.
that we reach out and talk to him.
Because it looks like, from being able to see the money that is going in,
Yeah.
and not hearing that money is not going out as far as rent payments.
Yeah.
Where's the money going?
That's right.
What you want to ask.
And so I want to set this up real quick before we go to the clip. You probably have never heard of Tim Bennett before, but chances are that or you've experienced things that if it wasn't for him, you wouldn't have been able to experience. The M Braves being in Pearl, Trustmark Park, he was instrumental in getting that there. He was a partial owner in the Biloxi Shuckers on the coast.
Wow.
First minority owner in Mississippi of a minor league baseball team. He was instrumental in getting that and the MGM. It's not MGM now. I think it's called Keesler, but the stadium there. He was instrumental in getting the minor league team in Montgomery there. So he's been praised by Major League Baseball. The last 3 governors have sung his praises. Current Governor Reeves, former Governor Phil Bryant, and former Governor Haley Barbour. So he was pretty revered in those circles, and being that we're, a red state, in predominantly Republican circles throughout the state. So, on its face, bringing Tim Bennett in to manage Smith Wills seemed like a pretty smart decision from the city's standpoint. Phil Bryant encouraged it. He wrote a letter when he was governor at the time saying that he knows that Tim will do great work there. And again, because he had so much success in other facets of his career.
Well, let's play the first little clip of the story where you can hear a little bit from Tim and a little bit about the situation.
Sure. But his most recent business venture, managing Smith Wills Stadium in Jackson, has been a money pit. Bennett's contract with the city required his company to pay $125,000 a year for rent. But records obtained by 3 on Your Side show the company never paid any rent until this month. Bennett got behind $500,000.
There's a lot of different reasons and factors. I wouldn't call them excuses.
Bennett said their first full year of operations got dealt a significant blow from the pandemic. Then his business partner, baseball legend Hank Aaron, died. But his most
So that is just the first little bit of it.
Yeah.
So he was behind $500,000
That's right.
on rent.
That's right.
And of course, like you say here, he came into Smith Wills during a particular hard time in the country or the world.
I mean, his first full year is affected by COVID. I believe Hank Aaron passed away in 2021. And again, we say it was his business partner. There was roughly around $10 million that Major League Baseball, and I may have been other sponsors as well, were prepared to give in the Southeast region. And I believe $5 million had already gone to somewhere in Alabama, maybe in Birmingham or Montgomery. I can't remember. Tim was hopeful they were going to be able to get the other $5 million, or at least millions, for Smith Wills. And, in his words, if they had gotten that would have gone directly to paying that rent. It would have been fine. But it didn't work out that way. Once Hank died, he was not able to make that happen. It was a situation where once Aaron died, those relationships, whatever Aaron was really pushing with MLB, it fizzled out, and that's unfortunate. And it wasn't just that. You had all kinds of other things. You had, and again, and I don't want anybody at home thinking, well, you're just making excuses for him. No, but you have to acknowledge that these factors were out there. The SWAC tournament there was canceled because of the water crisis. And, we had 2 of them. We had the water crisis that involved the most recent one where the governor got involved in all that. But even before that, we had that water crisis where all those record cold temperatures, those 2 winter storms that hit, knocked out water to a good portion of the city as well. And so Smith Wills is trying to operate during that time. During the pandemic, when the vaccines were being made available to people all over Mississippi, one of the places where you'd get a vaccination shop was Smith Wills, that same parking lot we just looked at. So there were a lot of things that were being done, a lot of things that were being implemented, a lot of things that happened that were adversely affecting Smith Wills. And I wonder, and again, he kind of came across like this in his interview, but Bennett's thinking from what he told us was that he thought that that money that was earmarked that they could get, hopefully it was earmarked before Hank Aaron died, would have paid the rent. And then if we operated a loss, we're at least paying off our obligations to the city.
Right.
And we can still continue to open up these fields for free, which they did. And the problem was that they're not doing anything that's going to bring enough revenue in to be able to make that payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we'll get into in a little bit later about the VA contract, because you think, well, wait a minute, you're getting this $360,000. We'll get to that. But, he was, the ballpark wasn't shut down. They renovated quite a bit. They renovated the bathrooms. They renovated all kinds of things. And they continued to let teams play there. Tougaloo played there. Belhaven played there.
Mm-hmm. And even allowed for Jackson Public Schools to come in and play
That's right.
there.
That's exactly
at
right.
no cost.
No
cost to the colleges, no cost to JPS, anything like that. Well, actually, we're going to play another clip for you guys real quick for that.
Jackson Public Schools, for example, had 6 schools that had to share one baseball field.
And we said, well, we'll cover the cost of that. We'll let JPS come and play. None of these things were part of the contract. We allowed both Belhaven and Tougaloo to play here for free. No slight to them. Happy to do it. And it was a good thing, and it was the right thing to do. But no revenue coming in.
And so, I mean, you got to think, let's take another step back with this. He's allowing these schools to come in and play. That's using the facility. That's power. That's water. That's all of the things that is required to keep a facility like that running. So you think, oh, well, his rent was only, and when you're talking of a facility this size, you think in terms of only with $125,000. However, people don't take into account the overhead costs that he's also having to pay in addition.
He estimated that for these games that you might have from Belhaven and JPS, you might have between 40 and 60 people come out to watch. Well, if you think about that from a concession standpoint, realistically, maybe half those folks might get something to eat or drink. We're talking pennies in the bucket. I mean, you take into account your food costs and stuff, you might make $1,000 or $2,000 from that. You might not net that much. And so, that it doesn't equate when you let's contrast this with a stadium that has even in the M-Braves this year, I think they're probably going to have 60, 70 home games. I mean, think about that. You have 500 people, 1,000 people there, and I'm sure they probably will have more than that, given that it's the last season.
Right.
And so you're going to make some money on that. You're going to make some money back. But this did not seem like it was something that was bringing in consistent revenue. When this VA contract comes along and he bid out for it and he got it, then he thought, well, we'd be able to do something with that. I mean, we asked him, I don't know if you have his talking about the profit percentage in a clip or not. If you don't, then I can talk about it. You don't, then that's perfect. So he, getting $360,000, he had to provide shuttle buses. He had to provide covered shelter for people to be able to wait in case it's raining or something. He had to make sure the parking lot was up to code in terms of couldn't be any weeds. He had to do all that stuff. I think he said there were some water leaks and stuff. They had to clear all that up and fix that, provide security out there. There are probably other expenses that were, again, pointed out in the contract, but the VA was not paying for this. He had to come out of pocket for that. And he estimated 15 to 20% profit from that contract, which, I mean, if you're doing the math, and I'm doing it on my calculator here, 360,000 times 20%, you're talking 15 to 20% is like $60,000 to $70,000. So it's half the rent, but it's not all of the rent. And he's been, the improvements, he had just books of receipts.
Yeah. I mean, you showed those. I mean, two very thick binders of receipts, that money that they have paid out of, or he has paid out of his own pocket to do improvements to Smith-Will Stadium.
Yeah. And the agreement had required him to spend $6 million. And the thinking was that was what it would take to get the stadium up to code to where they could host tournaments. That was sort of where that number came from. And, he maintained to us that he did all the improvements as required in the contract, that he made 7 figures in improvements. He would not say whether he specifically made $6 million in improvements or not, but he said he fulfilled the terms of the contract. And so, again, without us being able to go through and add up all of his receipts, which would probably take a while, we
Right.
could do it. But, he intimates that he made enough in improvements to be able to fulfill that contract. But we don't know what the facility looked like before he came in there. Replacing all the LED lights around the stadium is going to cost money.
Yes.
Just the video board that you may see if you're driving on Lakeland and you pass Smith Wills,
Mhm.
he said that was between $300,000 and $400,000. And so, that alone, people, I think, sometimes forget. And I mean, like when I say people, I mean us. We don't think about it. I have a hard enough time balancing my checking account and my checkbook. I don't really know. I know what things cost for me. I know what a gallon of milk costs these days. I know what eggs cost.
Mhm.
But I don't know for somebody like Tim Bennett how much it costs to replace this, how much it costs to
Right.
renovate this. I don't know what those costs are. When you have a tournament come through and you take everybody out to eat, he did that at a local restaurant, ended up paying $14,000.
Wow.
And so we don't have. I don't think that we can comprehend those costs because we don't have a frame of reference for it.
Right.
And so it's difficult to kind of see, that money can go out the door pretty quickly. And he made a lot of money in professional baseball. He did. I mean, as a minority owner, from these business deals that went through, the man has been very successful. And if it wasn't for those successes, or even the VA contract, he told us that he probably would have been able to last a year.
Wow.
He probably would have had to fold in late 2020.
And so, considering everything that they are giving back to the community, even take the colleges out of the equation. If you just think of what it is providing for the kids of the Jackson public school system,
Yeah,
I mean, that is everything to me as a mom. And you see these kids that want to get into sports and want to be able to achieve these great things through sports, and they don't have the correct facility or things to be able to make that happen for them. For someone to provide that for free to the
That's right.
schools and to these kids, it could literally change these children's lives. So it's a very big deal to me. I find that very awesome that they were able to do that. But he said, I mean, he told you, and I'm reading here, it says that they've done nothing but lose money.
Yeah.
He said, and that there's nothing wrong with that because we're giving back. So if you lose money, but you're giving back to the community, that's a win to me. And that's what Bennett said.
But you can't keep doing it forever. And we talked about that. It's, you're going to burn out pretty quickly. If you're having to spend everything you can to give back to the community and nothing's coming in, eventually you're going to run out of money.
Right.
And eventually he's going to run out of money, and it's not sustainable. And so, one of the things that we weren't able to put in as much in the video story, and we have it online, Anthony Warren's great companion piece on this, talking about the Legacy League and things that he's trying to get materialized now that he wasn't able to before. The Legacy League would guarantee that you had games played at Smith Wills and that you have buy-in from other teams and other parts of the country, reasons for people to come out. We have that deal that the city of Jackson, there was a press conference and Tim spoke about with having that sister city in Columbia, where they're going to be doing baseball back and forth with that particular city there, which is a huge opportunity. You have Major League Baseball players who know Tim Bennett who are coming in and offering things for kids. And, I played a long time ago. I wasn't good, but baseball has been one of those things that when I used to watch it as a kid, it's a magical sport to me. It's just something about that ball field. It's just something about going out there and the game and just what it brings, what it instills in you. And, it's sorely needed here. It's sorely needed in a place where, kids may grow up not knowing what they're going to be able to do with their lives or not having any sense of direction. And being able to play in a facility like Smith Wills or even that companion ball field, just having a place to play is a big deal if you don't have a place to play. And, I can't imagine what that's like. You have 6 schools that have 6 baseball fields or 6 baseball teams and only have 1 field to play at.
Yeah.
And so it's tough. And
But and also another thing you have to think about for these kids is, there's a million baseball fields out there, but for them to come to the facility that has been upgraded like this and is nice, and it's a nice facility for them, it really kind of help change their whole mindset and let these kids help them realize that they are worth that, that they don't have to be sectioned off to this crummy baseball field because this is all that they can be given when the Smith Will Stadium, they can be allowed to play in a nice place.
And people, and if they had played in other areas, they probably would have had to pay for that. And the school probably wouldn't have been able to afford that. And so, obviously, if people came in and I saw somebody's comment saying they should have paid, nothing is free. But, with respect to these schools, they didn't approach him and ask if they could play there for free. He offered it. And he offered it because, in his words, he did not want them to be denied. He wanted them to be able to have that opportunity. And, the organization benefits from concessions and stuff, but it's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There are profit sharing things that he's trying to do going forward, where if schools come in and play for free, and this is not part of the piece, but stuff he told us, that he wants to share like concession revenue and gate revenue and parking fees and things like that, to where the schools will have profit sharing, so they will get something out of it. They bring their boosters in to run concessions, for example, so that Tim is not having to supply that with labor. And a lot of these things that people at home are probably saying, well, I've never heard this before. Well, yeah, because nobody's reported it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's reported it at all. And
nobody asked those questions.
Nobody's asking those questions. And so there's a lot of stuff that he's really trying to do. And what I hope, and I'm always an optimist. I'm skeptical because of the job, but I try to be an optimist. You hope that he's turning it around now and he's going to be able to do things with it.
Mm-hmm.
The contract has been amended now. He doesn't have to pay rent. He has to pay other things, so he's not having to pay as much. The city forgave some of that rent. We'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going to say it was forgiven. The city will say that there were improvements that counted toward rent payments. So maybe rent forgiveness is not the way to say it.
Let me play a clip of you talking to Tim real quick
about how much he's
put in.
Yeah. How over leveraged are you personally from everything that you've had to put in?
It's not good. But what does it matter when you're gone? If you don't leave it while you got it, when you're gone, the opportunity's gone with it.
I love that. Now, I have a very good friend of mine who passed away, who was, he had that same mindset, that same outlook at stuff. And what really makes me smile about that is he was also a massive Atlanta Braves baseball fan. So maybe it's just something about the people that are baseball fans that are willing to give back and wanting to be like that. It was, if you don't give it when you're here, it was what matter when you're gone.
You're right. I want to give our viewers and those watching today, I want to try to give a little more perspective to what he said, because again, when we're talking about trying to make sure the story is succinct and it's not a 10, 12 minute piece, there are things that have to be left on the cutting room floor. One of the things that Tim told us was that he had a car accident in the 90s that almost killed him, and he survived it, and that changed his perspective in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I asked him that question about being over leveraged, what you heard at home, you saw him get choked up.
Mm-hmm.
You heard him say, not good. What does it matter when you're gone? If you don't leave while you got it, when you're gone, the opportunity's gone with it.
He had tears in his eyes.
Here's what we had to take out. He said, not good, but it took all of a split second for me to hit the back of that truck at 100 miles an hour. So what does it matter when you're gone if you don't leave it while you've got it? When you're gone, the opportunity's gone with it.
Wow.
So he was referencing that. If we had left that in, we would have had to go back and talk about the accident. It would have been in another 20, 30 seconds that we couldn't afford to at that point. We tried to get his thought out there, but just to share it with you at home, he was talking about an instance where he was almost killed. Doctors didn't think he was going to make it. He has wiring and things in his jaw and his face. He had things permanently, implants and things of that nature from that accident, where they did not expect him to make it. And so, again, that doesn't mean to naysayers out there, You can have a near-death experience and you can still take advantage of somebody. That doesn't mean that you can't do something nefarious here, but I think where so many people are sitting here looking at the outside with limited information and thinking, oh, well, this guy's taking the city for a ride. He's making money hand over fist. Well, that's not what he's telling us. That's not what he's showing us in terms of these receipts. And for 90 minutes when we talked to this guy, he came across as somebody who's been giving, if nothing else, he's got money already, and he's pouring a ton of money into this, and he's really not getting anything back. And he's not even asking the city to make him whole here. He's just trying to keep this going so he can do things for others. He's being successful in other parts of his career,
Right.
which are funding this money pit, basically.
Yes.
They're funding his ability to throw money here at something that's not making enough money back for him.
Now, when you spoke with him, and we also heard about how Ward 1 Councilman Ashby Foote wanted to know why he never got a performance bond.
Yep.
What is a performance bond?
So, okay. As written in the contract, a performance bond is basically a guarantee of payment. So if you, trying to think of so we have these things called, they're not the same thing, but I'm just going to use an example. So elected officials have what's called a surety bond. And a surety bond means, I may be mispronouncing that, that if they are convicted of embezzlement and they stole $100,000 from the city in their public position, this insurance kicks in and pays the $100,000. So that now the city may still ask for that money back from them, but it will make the taxpayers whole. And so when you're an elected official, you have to basically get a bond for yourself. You have to be bonded in case you do something stupid and that kicks in.
So it's essentially it's an insurance policy, but it's called a bond.
It's called a bond. Now, what Bennett says here is that he reached out to his insurance carriers, and they told him that a performance bond is a situation where if you're taking on a construction project, you need one for that. And if you don't complete the project like you were supposed to, that performance bond kicks in and pays whatever's supposed to be allocated for that project. He mentioned that there were similar arrangements in his contracts with various construction projects he's been involved in, like Trustmark and others. And so he thought that whenever the city drafted this contract, that they probably looked at some of those previous agreements, saw the need for a performance bond, and put that in there. He said, if they had told him that we needed one for rent, he would have done that. That's a matter of debate. That's his opinion. The contract is pretty clear in what it says. So I don't know if Bennett's answer is going to be sufficient. Again, for, if Councilman Foote wants to push the issue, if they end up investigating this and looking at it very closely, then, that he may have repercussions from that. But that's what he said. And when they did the renewed contract, they basically took his improvements to the stadium as if he had been paying rent. And they they basically took all of that as payments and said he only owes $100,000. So $400,000 of that was wiped away from the city. And then he's going to pay the $100,000 over the next year. And instead of paying rent, he pays debt service on some turf out there, and he pays yearly utility payments like power.
Right.
And so it's less than $125,000 a year, but it's still money that he's going to have to pay for the upkeep of the facility. And hopefully he'll be able to make those payments. And obviously, if he doesn't, if something happens, we're certainly going to keep watching this and follow up on it and let you know.
But it sounds like with the city making this quote unquote deal, and if anybody has not familiar with the way real estate works and rental agreements and things such as that, I grew up in real estate, so I'm pretty familiar with it. But if you are renting from someone and things need to be repaired and you do that out of your own pocket, if you turn over those receipts, then typically, and there are situations where it does not happen this way, but typically that money will come off of what your rent payment would be. And,
in this case too, and again, this is a lot of stuff, again, that was on the cutting room floor, but one has to also wonder and ask the question, and it's a very valid question, that, okay, well, it's on him to pay the rent, but how forcefully was the city asking him to pay the rent? And so Bennett told us that he and his lawyers had maintained contact with the city, would tell them when these various things were happening, these hardships with COVID and other things like that. And so he gave the impression that there was pretty regular communication with them. And that, when we went to try to find notices of rent, like, hey, you need to be paying this, that would have been sent out typically, the city had none of that to produce for us. So it looks like, at least from the city's own records, that they didn't send a single notice of him being behind on his rent at all over the last 4 years. And so that doesn't look good on the city. Because again, yeah, he's supposed to pay it, but the city's also supposed to be following up with him regularly on it. And he said he's been in contact with them. So then they have this negotiation in January of this year, and things are going to be better for him going forward. But now there's another state agency looking into this. So the auditor's office, and Mayor Lumumba told us this, Jackson's mayor, that the auditor's office is now looking into whether or not the city taking those payments or those renovations as payments is something the city can legally do. Can a municipality essentially forgive debt or use something in place of debt for this situation, for a situation like this? And so the auditor's looking into that. And, we don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. We have no idea. We do know that the state was already trying to get that property from what we talked about earlier.
Right.
And now you have a second agency looking. We have no reason to believe they won't act independently. The mayor believes that this is part and parcel a way for the state to wrestle this resource away from the city. And if you look in the past, there have been a couple of instances where the state has tried to do that. There's still litigation in federal court regarding the state trying to take the airport away from Jackson and establish a regional board. There were efforts last legislative session and the one before it where the state was trying to establish a regional utility board over Jackson's water system. That changed when they brought Ted Hennepin in and the federal, control of the system. But again, that was something that was a possibility that has not come to fruition. So there have been attempts by lawmakers for whatever reason, whether legitimate or not, to take a resource from Jackson and put it in management in the hands of someone else who could either manage it or own it outright. Right. And so, the mayor believes that there's something nefarious behind that. He doesn't think those are coincidences. And, we will see in the future whether or not, if the state does win in court, what happens to Smith Wills? Does 10 minutes stay there? Does the auditor come back and say, this contract you had is legitimate, and you're able, a municipality can essentially forgive debt in these circumstances? So we have some things that we don't know. And Bennett, to his point, or for his part, has stayed pretty steadfast that he feels some kind of way about this because he's given a lot.
Yeah.
And, I know several times in the interview, he would talk about some of the things he's done in the past. And I got the impression from him that he feels like he feels personally sort of, it's an affront to him because it's like, all these folks have endorsed me. Yeah. All these folks have thought I've been doing great work. And now suddenly people think I'm not. People think I'm
ripping the city off.
Right. And so, and he felt some kind of way about that. But he did speak a little bit about the state's move to take back that property. And I think that's our last clip.
It is.
And we kind of ended the piece with this.
This is something different. This is our personal investments, our private dollars that I'm putting in to try to make this work. And I would love for everybody to be on the same page, at least for this situation, because this situation is about the kids.
Look, this situation is about the kids. And it does seem like a lot of the stuff that he has done and does there at Smith Wills is geared towards making sports better for our youth, especially obviously baseball, giving Jackson public school systems a place for the kids to come play their games. And the colleges was Tougaloo and where else? Belhaven. Yeah. It's just awesome. It's awesome that he's able to do this. It's awesome my personal feeling, which my personal feelings mean nothing, but the fact that the city did take that step to take the improvements as towards the payment of the rent, I think that is a great thing, and I hope that that is something that is able to stay in place.
Well, I'll tell you this, just to kind of tie it all back into a bow, because we talked about this at the end of the piece last night. You know, the big point of contention the state had was basically, well, there's this operation of this the smoke shop there.
Mm-hmm.
Bennett said once that came out, and we've reported this previously, by the way, but that, you know, the smoke shop had been there before Bennett signed the contract with the city. It had just celebrated its 10 years there, or was getting ready to.
The smoke shop.
The smoke shop.
And
yeah.
so, and Bennett took
ownership or management in 2019. The smoke shop had been there for almost 10 years.
Okay.
And celebrated its 10 year. And then they bowed out. And Bennett told us that, you know, he basically paid them, tried to make them whole as they were walking away. And we asked for a figure. It said it wasn't 6 figures, but it was 5 figures. So we don't know how much, but it was in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a pretty, you know, significant. So again, when you look at all the stuff that's been put out there, you know, that's additional expenses that he incurred and his company incurred to make sure that business was made whole, but then also to ensure that they could walk away if this is a violation of the lease. So,
right.
You know, we don't know where this is going to go, and we're going to keep covering this story. But I think having his perspective out there is incredibly important, because whether you agree with him or not, whether you sit there and look at what he said and you believe it or not, we're hearing from him.
Right.
And that's so important. We're not just taking documents we found, slapping them on a screen,
Mm-hmm.
and making assumptions all day long. We're letting him speak for himself. And we have these agencies that are investigating. And if they feel like something here that's done, not necessarily something that Tim did, but whether it's the city's behavior or it could be this business that was existing there, then we're going to find out about it and we're going to go forward. And rest assured, if something does come out that's illegal about this, that and somebody is implicated publicly, then we're going to share that with you.
We are. Yeah. Because, you know, it's not all the stories are good and nice and happy. We got to tell
That's right.
all of it. We got to tell all of it, which we will.
Yeah.
Let's see. Cassandra Stovall. See, I said I'm probably pronouncing something wrong here. But she says, this is always about the money and control over the city of Jackson. Thank you so much for leaving that comment there, leaving your thoughts there. We do appreciate it. And it can seem like that a lot. When you come down to the brass tacks of things, it really does have to do with the money in all the situations.
I mean, you know, there's no money here at this point, right? The assets there are worth something. The Jackson is the largest city in Mississippi.
Yes.
And we hear this from bedroom communities a lot. Not the official people, I'm not saying like the mayor of such and such or that. No, we hear this from people who live in bedroom communities. Let me clarify it.
Because I've never heard this term
Right.
before. What is a bedroom
community? So Jackson's here, and then you have you have Pearl and Brandon and Ridgeland and all those cities that are outside of the city are bedroom communities.
Okay.
So you hear from people who live in these bedroom communities sometimes that, Jackson's just going to go under, and I just can't wait for that to happen, and blah, 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 and it's just going to happen. Here's the problem with that. You have 40,000 plus people from those bedroom communities who travel every day to work downtown and in other parts of the capital city. You have a lot of people, ourselves included. I live in Jackson, but I'm saying a lot of folks come in here. So you have that. You have these areas of the city that show tremendous promise and growth. You have a ton of potential here. At the end of the day, if Jackson fails, these bedroom communities aren't going to be suddenly flourishing. They're not, because they rely on Jackson far more than they probably want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say they, I mean the people who live in those communities who are saying these things. Not everybody feels like that. Sometimes it can come across as an us versus them relationship. But at the end of the day, we all need each other.
We do.
And if there's one thing that I would love to see, I don't think I'm going to see it anytime soon, but I'd love to see it. And I haven't really seen it since I've been here as a reporter 10 years. You go down the coast and you see how all those communities in the coast work together. You see how they're not all out for each other and to the detriment of others. Biloxi and Gulfport, and Ocean Springs and Pass Christian and all these communities in that micropolitan area are they work very well together. You have other cities that work well with bedroom communities, other states. I would love to see that here, because that old expression, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Mhm.
If Jackson succeeds and flourishes and does amazing things, these other cities reap the benefits too. Everybody benefits from that. But there is a lot of untapped potential here. And there are people sometimes that may or may not be looking for ways to exploit that.
Mhm.
And it's the nature of those kinds of opportunities. When living in North Mississippi, I remember seeing how much Memphis has changed in the last 10, 15 years. And there's so much more development in a lot of parts of the city. There's, of course, they have the Grizzlies and they have other assets there, and they have a lot of, but Memphis has really seen a rebirth in the last 10, 15 years. Yeah, there's crime, and yeah, there are other things that obviously they're trying to work on. Cities can bounce back. Cities can do that, but there has to be consistent leadership in place. There have to be people that buy into that also live outside the city, because again, you've got to have people that want to come to Jackson for different reasons and want to do that and want to have opportunities to do that. And I think the fact that you have lawmakers interested in certain segments of Jackson, and I'm not saying that that's related to money, because I can't make that kind of statement. If we had specific proof, these lawmakers are interested in these parts of the city, obviously it's worth something to them. If they think the airport, the water system, now this land around Smith Wills is worth something. If they didn't think that it was worth anything, they wouldn't even be trying to get involved in its operation.
Yes. Well, that's one thing I love about being able to do this, talking about the investigation that you do on stories, or even just digging deeper into something, is we're able to, whereas on the newscast, you only have this story was 6 minutes long, but here we are, and we're 53 minutes in, CJ.
Well, there you go. Hey, could you pull up that comment from the Mike magazine, that 150? That's a great question. And I kind of want to answer that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I'm going to bring this up. The Mike magazine, she has a great voice, by the way, if you check her out on Facebook. But anyway, says, would they ever consider relocating the Capitol once again, like they have in history's past?
So I don't know if that kind of, we hear that from time to time, not from lawmakers, but we hear it, rumblings of it on social media. I personally hope they don't, because there's so much history in Jackson. We've heard that they're going to move the fairgrounds somewhere else, or they're going to move this, and you have a lot of state agencies that have built facilities in Pearl and have built them outside. The Department of Revenue is in the old WorldCom building in Clinton. The state crime lab's in Pearl. They're building a new DPS facility right next to it. That's where MHP and other parts of the Department of Public Safety are going to go. So there are agencies that are putting their footprints in these bedroom communities. I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I don't think it should. I think I don't think you should just, I think there's a lot of things that are being done in terms of investments in the capital city. And I think this too, to answer what the Mike magazine asked, whether you like what he did or not, the governor has put forth efforts to invest a lot of money in Jackson from the standpoint of Capitol Police. Now, whether you agree with Capitol Police being in the capital city or not, whether you agree with this new court system or not, which was sent to federal court and all these things happen and all that stuff, whether you agree with any of that or not, those things don't work if Jackson fails.
Right.
Those things don't. That's a lot of money thrown at something just for it to, So I don't think that I don't think it's a viable option to move the capital out of Jackson. I think that's pie in the sky.
Yeah.
I think it would cost way too much to do it. I think it would be met with so much backlash. And the other thing is something that nobody ever wants to really talk about, but we're going to talk about it right now. Wonderful. The optics of a state capital moving from a majority black city are not good. They're not good at all. I'm saying the quiet part out loud, that the optics of that would not be good, regardless of the reason behind it. And it would not be something that would be seen as
favorable.
yeah,
Good.
it wouldn't be seen as a good idea.
Well, what's so
That's for
funny
sure.
is you saying that, right? Then you bringing that up. And as we were talking about it moving, or, the possibility of that happening, I thought to myself, I said, the people of Jackson, the people that live here, that have to hear all the time of people talking about how bad Jackson is and how horrible it is, how would that make them feel if they picked up and moved the capital? I mean, it would just make people feel like they were just trying to be completely wiped away and discounted. And
you'd feel abandoned. You'd feel abandoned. Yeah.
And so I think it's just funny that you said that, the way the optics of it would not look good. And it's, at the same time, I'm having that thought: how would that make the people of Jackson feel? It would not make it. I do not believe that it would make Jackson any better, or the state of Mississippi any stronger. I don't see that would be a possibility.
And then you have a ton of bad press from other states looking at this and looking at the optics of it. And again, regardless of whether or not that's the true reason behind trying to do something like that or trying to pass something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen things from lawmakers in bills that just say that as if they actually think it has a chance of passing. Okay. But I don't see that happening. And I'll tell you, if it did, I think that you would have a lot of problems. I think you'd have a lot of problems, not just from the optics, but you'd have problems. You'd have business owners that would speak up about it. And so I don't think, I just don't think it's a viable solution. And I'll say this as a native Mississippian, I hope that doesn't happen, because I think that we need these resources in Jackson. We need to make sure, historically, the state capitol has been here. It's always been here. It needs to be here. And, you don't quit when things get tough.
You don't.
And,
you do not.
And I think these recent efforts, whether you like them or not, I think to some degree show some degree of buy-in from the governor. And I don't see that. I just don't see lawmakers agreeing to abandon all that. And I hopefully we won't.
Hopefully we won't.
And you're right. No, you're right. Yeah, it was a question that's been tossed around, and it seems like we hear it almost every year. It kind of comes around. It's we hear some crazy theories every year, and sometimes, and you may have a lawmaker that's like, I'm just going to write this up. Okay, buddy. But is it going to happen? I would no. I don't. That would be some pretty strong odds for that to happen. I think we have a better chance of winning the Powerball than that happening.
What is the Powerball? I mean, I'll go out and buy a ticket if we need.
I don't know. I have no idea.
If we got those kind of odds. No, but you don't, like you said a second ago, you don't give up when it's hard. Tim Bennett here over Smithwell Stadium, he has not given up when it's hard. He is actually trying to give even more to the city of Jackson, to the youth of Jackson. And we are not giving up, but we are going to stop because we're at it for an hour.
We gotta
you got other things to do.
This train's got to slow down for a second so we can finish the rest of our day.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I'm very tired. I'm very glad that it is Friday. But we do appreciate all of you that are tuned in. Let's see. The Mike Magazine says here, I admire your work, brother, and Cara, keep up the good work,
very
baby
sweet.
Girl.
Thank you very much. And we had quite a bit of compliments from people on here too, and I appreciate that very much. You don't know how much that means to me. It's sometimes it's a thankless job in some ways, because we're doing things that are not popular, and we do things that are going to make us, seen as it's. I had somebody the other day ask me, what's it like when you go to a business to ask questions or to an office? And I said, well, used to I could do it and nobody would say anything. And now it becomes like when Jim Cantori shows up somewhere from the Weather Channel.
Get out.
And you're like, oh God, if Jim Cantori's here, it means there's about to be a huge tornado or something happening. So, no, we have to always be there to ask questions. And I think it's so important that even when we have these stories like that, every time we do a story where there's somebody we've identified who may be doing something illegal, I can't tell you how many times we've reached out to try to talk to them and they don't want to talk to us. And I feel like it's such a benefit for them to do that.
Yes.
Because Tim Bennett here could have just said, no, I'm not getting involved. I don't want to. He was gracious enough to sit down with us. And whether you believe him or not, I'm grateful for him doing that. Yes. I think that's a really good thing. And frankly, we need more people who may come within the crosshairs of an investigation, who could take a page from that and learn from that and come talk to us.
Yes. because transparency, or at least trying to give transparency, means a lot.
Yeah.
Means a lot. All right. So that is going to be the end of a WLBT Plus today. We do appreciate all of you guys that have hung out with us for this past hour. I love getting to do these with CJ. So funny. He came in here earlier talking about been on for an hour. He said, well, about 15 minutes today. And I go, 20, 30, forever.
I'm going to start setting my alarm on my phone here. So I'm saying that.
But so we're going to let you guys go. Make sure that you enjoy your weekend, but you also stay safe if you get out in any rain showers, anything like that. Download the First Alert weather app so that you can be notified if there are any changes in the forecast or any severe weather heading your way. And also make sure you download the WLBT news app so that you can get notifications on breaking news as it comes into us. You can also watch all of our newscasts there. Some of our newscasts are being preempted over the next couple of weeks. There's this little thing, people playing a bunch of games, winning medals. It's happening over in Paris. You may have heard of it, but that a lot of our newscasts is being preempted by that. So saying that, you can always watch our newscasts on our app, on our website on demand. If you don't catch them when they're happening, or you can watch them live as they're happening. So you guys have a great weekend. I will be back Monday at 1. CJ will be back with me at some time or another because he just can't stop investigating stuff. No.
It's true. We have more rocks to overturn.
Yes.
More rocks to look under. So.
But you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you later. Bye.